Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a multi-day large severe weather event across the United States that'll bring scattered to numerous damaging winds, large to very large hail, and a few tornadoes. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll begin with the northern plains and the Midwest. That is where we actually already have showers and storms ongoing this morning, and this will continue into the afternoon hours, which is when we'll actually see more severe weather today. But there's a low pressure system located in Canada that is actually bringing that shower and storm activity across areas up into the northern plains and as well as into the Midwest, and we're going to see more severe weather like that later today. Now for the rest of the United States, it's still a little bit active across areas in the eastern half and as well as the southern half of the United States, but overall we're not seeing really any significant severe weather because the main system is that low pressure system back up into Canada, and what that's going to be doing is bringing that risk for severe weather across the central, northern, and as well as parts of the Midwest over the next few days. Now the jet stream has a lot to do with this because again we have that low pressure system in the upper levels that's sitting back up in Canada, very strong upper level winds as well. That's going to aid longevity of some of the supercells that we see later today and as well as tomorrow. And as we go over the next few days, we're going to continue to see that trough move off to the north and east. That means that we'll still see some shower and storm activity, especially since we still have a pretty defined area of a jet stream across areas in the northern United States, but the risk of severe weather will start to shift more to the south as that jet stream as well dips down further to the south. So as we go into Wednesday into Thursday, we'll continue to see another trough actually develop going into Wednesday into Thursday down here, so this will be kind of located near the Midwest. This will help to increase the risk for at least some showers and storms and maybe a little bit of severe weather as well as we head into areas like Thursday and as well as into Friday. Once we go into the weekend, things become a bit calmer, but we're going to start to see a strengthening jet stream in the southern and central United States. This could also increase the risk for severe weather further to the south and parts of maybe even the southern plains as we go into the late weekend. So keep a close eye on this. As we get closer, I'll keep you posted with more details there. Now, before I show you the severe weather potential and as well as the timing over the next several days, I do want to discuss the low-level jet. That's what helps rotate supercells at the lower levels, creating the threat of tornadoes. And right now, it's actually kind of an interesting setup because the trough that we have back up in Canada is way more defined in the low levels. You'll notice those strong low-level winds that are currently ongoing back up in Canada this morning. That is actually going to be associated with that trough back up there to the north. So you'll notice as we go throughout the day today, there will be a little bit of an increase of a low-level jet primarily across areas in like South Dakota and as well as Minnesota. So if there's any sort of supercellular activity there that becomes discrete, we might see a little bit of an increased risk of tornadoes. But right now, the risk for tornadoes is actually quite low with the current setup. We're really watching more for damaging winds and large hail, mainly because we're looking at a lot more of a linear storm activity. And in addition to that, the low-level jet is not that strong where these supercells will be. As we go into Wednesday, the low-level jet still stays a little bit strong back over in areas like the Midwest. It's not very strong though. I mean, we're still talking about 30 knots at most. That's a fairly weak low-level jet. And in addition to that, we don't have really a whole lot of ingredients there for an increased tornado risk. And as well, the trough that we have that's really defined is way back up into Canada. The other trough that'll develop is going to be closer to the Midwest, but it's going to be a very weak surface low. So overall, the risk of tornadoes out of this particular event is going to be fairly low, if not close to zero for a lot of areas. And once we go into the weekend, really not a whole lot of organization with that low-level jet. So very good news there in terms of the tornado risk, but we are very concerned still about the damaging wind and large hail potential. And you'll notice for today, there is actually a large area here of severe weather, including a enhanced risk of severe weather. That enhanced risk currently does include parts of northern Kansas and South Dakota. This is going to be the hotspot today for severe weather. So storm chasers, large hail, damaging winds very likely in this area with the potential for hail upwards of 3 inches in diameter. Damaging winds possibly as high as 70 to 80 miles per hour is not out of the question. Slight risk of severe weather goes all the way back through the upper Michigan Peninsula and as well as back into Colorado. Overall, again, the main concerns today are damaging winds and large hail. This is the damaging wind threat from the Storm Prediction Center, which they're indicating that the highest wind potential is currently located across Kansas and as well as Nebraska. And again, this hatched area here does represent at least a low chance for damaging winds exceeding 75 miles per hour. So definitely concerning there. Make sure that you are protecting your trampolines, any outdoor loose lawn items. Make sure you're doing that. Today's trampoline meter risk is at a moderate stage, so not as high as we usually have it. It's actually at a fairly medium stage for today activity across this entire region, by the way. The hail potential is going to primarily be focused across southern parts of Nebraska, so fairly small area, but definitely noticeable. That is where we could see hail exceeding 2 inches in diameter, so as high as maybe apple-sized hail. Outside of there, we could see some sporadic hail across this very large area, but overall, I'm not too concerned about hail exceeding 2 inches in diameter. We'll probably be watching for up to golf ball-sized hail across anywhere from the Midwest back through the Central Plains. And notice, by the way, there is another risk of severe weather across the southeast United States, the mid-Atlantic, and as well as parts of the southern plains, but the risk today is very conditional. It's very low, and it's going to be a lot of isolated storm activity, so not nearly as concerning there. We have a much more organized system back up in the Midwest, and as well as across parts of the Great Plains. For the timing, today we're going to begin with the Central Plains, and we'll show you the Midwest. Storms will fire off as early as around lunchtime, maybe just a little bit after that. Across areas in Nebraska, as well as back in northwest Iowa, you'll notice the storm activity there. In central and southern parts of Nebraska, those are the storms that could produce a significant hail potential, increasing the risk of hail upwards of 3 inches in diameter. By right about 6-7 o'clock, that is when this will become more of a cluster of storms. So once that happens, this will become more of a damaging wind threat. But some of these storms could still be producing some large to very large hail at this time. And then once we go past 8 o'clock, we'll see those storms move off to the east, more of a cluster of storms. So again, damaging winds is going to be the main concern as that marches off to the east. And eventually going towards midnight, we'll still see some storm activity out there. A lot of the storm activity will become more of an isolated severe weather risk. Even though there'll be a lot of storms, it'll be more of an isolated risk of severe weather, maybe some damaging winds. There'll be a lot of lightning as well. So obviously it is the 4th of July. Very concerning there that we have a lot of lightning. That could very well be dangerous for fireworks. So again, if you have any plans to set off fireworks tonight, make sure you are staying very weather aware. And if you're going to any outdoor activities as well, make sure you're staying weather aware because this could very well impact those plans tonight. For those back over in the Midwest, we'll be watching for storm activity this afternoon to fire up across areas in Minnesota back into Iowa. You'll notice this is the main area of storm activity though, mainly large hail and damaging winds. Storms will actually be a bit more isolated for those back over in Minnesota and Wisconsin, not nearly as widespread as what we'll see back down in Nebraska and as well as Kansas. So some good news there, but obviously stay weather aware because if you do see a storm, it could be producing lightning, damaging winds, and maybe some large hail. I would rule out an isolated tornado as I mentioned before, but I think the risk today is very low. And then by the overnight hours, so right around midnight, we'll still see some showers and storms out there. They'll continue across Wisconsin, but a lot of those again will not be severe after midnight tonight due to the lack of energy that we'll have in the atmosphere. By the morning hours, storms will start to move back out to the east, and we'll be watching for our next risk of severe weather, which does exist going into tomorrow. As of right now, very large slight risk of severe weather, which does include those from the Midwest back through the central and even parts of the southern plains. Now, right now, the main concern for tomorrow is the damaging wind threat. We'll also be watching for some sporadic hail. A lot of this will not be past 2 inches in diameter, but I would rule out a little bit of hail above 2 inches in diameter across areas in the central plains. That is where it'll be a little bit more favorable, but overall, the risk of that is low at this time. For tomorrow, though, we'll be watching for showers and storms throughout the morning hours. This could actually stabilize the atmosphere a little bit, so it might lower the risk of severe storms during the late afternoon hours. But you'll know storms will fire up right around about 5-6 o'clock tomorrow. That'll be primarily across areas in Kansas and as well as Oklahoma. These will be primarily producing large hail initially with some strong downburst winds. They'll not be very quick moving, so overall the speed of these storms, the directional shear, not very high tomorrow, so the storms will be moving slow. That means that we could see some localized flash flooding, and around midnight or so, that's when we'll have a bit more of a defined line of storms develop across Kansas and as well as back through Oklahoma, and mainly because, again, we'll have a bit more of a stabilized atmosphere during the afternoon due to the shower and storm activity that we'll see during the morning hours tomorrow. That will eventually push down to the south and southeast. That'll still produce some damaging winds overnight, but overall hail threat will start to diminish after sunset. And then for those back over in the Midwest, we'll be watching for showers and storms. This could actually get upgraded maybe to an enhanced risk. I don't think it will, but there's a low chance it could maybe for damaging winds. That'll be mainly across areas in Wisconsin as well as in Illinois during the mid to late afternoon hours, and eventually going closer to 8 to 9 o'clock, storms move off to the east, much weaker by that time. Energy will start to diminish, and that means the severe weather threat will also start to lower by then. And then for tossing trampolines on trees Thursday, we currently do have a fairly large risk of severe weather that's going to extend from the southern plains back through the central plains. We'll talk about more on this in the next forecast, but damaging winds and large hail are the main concerns. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like the button down below and subscribe if you're not already.